from the top. Good morning. Welcome to First Church Unitarian in Littleton, both in person in the sanctuary and online. My name is Cindy Malley. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a middle-aged white woman with dark brown hair with some salt speckled in and glasses and a frequent smile on my face. Oh, thank you. So if you've been paying even the slightest bit of attention to me up here since the start of the year, you know what I'm going to say next, and I won't make it long. Please sign up for hospitality. If you're unable to figure out how to do it, reach out to me or one of the other deacons, Bill Dustin or Monica Pillman, she's in the back, and we'll help you figure out how to do it. We are hoping to start coffee hour next week, but at this moment, that won't happen. But I hope that you all go online and sign up, and then we can start drinking together after church. And wouldn't that be nice? So I was told to mention just a few things today, so I'm going to try to lift them all up. If I forget something that you have asked me to share, just shout out at the end, it'll be fine. The things I want to lift up first is what's happening after church today. Very important. We have a warranted meeting at 11:30. If you are joining us online, the link is on our website, and the meeting will not go out over YouTube. So go to the link on the website after church, and for those of you who are voting members, please stay after the service. If you're not a voting member, you are welcome to stay too to see how we do this, but it's at 11:30, warranted meeting, very important. Also,
and it's the same Zoom URL. They could actually stay if they wanted to, but it is on the website, but it's also the same worship service URL.
Cool, and Mike did that on the microphone, so I don't need to repeat it. Thank you, Mike. And following our meeting today, there is letter writing for democracy with Linda. And Linda wanted me to let everybody know that there is chili, and there's cornbread, and there's regular bread. And Lynn told me also the same announcement to make, but to let you all know that you can have food, but only if you write letters. So that's after the meeting today. And lentil soup, thank you. I want to remind you to read Community Matters. That's where you'll find the bulk of everything else. Oh, okay. That one wasn't told to me ahead of time. The jams and jellies are for sale after church, too, in the vestry. Also, the Day of the Dead service. In the Community Matters, there was an error that is listed as today. It's actually next week. So come next week for the Day of the Dead service. And this one's really important. The lights and the fans in the bathrooms are not working. So if you should, they're working, but they're turned off. So if you need to use the restroom, please bring your camera, or not your camera, bring your, that's a whole other type of service. Don't bring your camera, bring your phone, which in a lot of cases is a camera. And your flashlight, that's absolutely right. That's right. You want to bring your flashlight so that you can see what you need to do. I think that I have managed to say everything that people asked me to say. Awesome. So please silence your phones. And after I ring the bell, we're going to have the reading of the warrant. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ann Donald, your clerk. The voting list is now available on our website as well as posted at the church. I'm notifying you,
Ann Donald,
the members of First Church Unitarian lawfully entitled to vote in its affairs, to meet in the sanctuary of the church or on Zoom on Sunday, October 23rd, today, at 11:30 a.m. following the Sunday service, to act on the following articles. First, to review and accept the minutes from the May 15, 2022 warranted meeting. Second, to release the $23,000 from the Green sanctuary engineering study to
I'm
the
Ann
general
Donald, your
reserve
clerk.
fund, as it will no longer be needed.
Hi,
Third,
I'm
to release $15,000 from the hybrid worship fund to the general reserve fund, as those funds are no longer needed. Fourth, to consider the disposition of fiscal year 2022 surplus of $26,111.06. Fifth, to renew the neighborhood supper task force for another year. Sixth, to transact any other business that may lawfully come before said meeting.
I was expecting to play a video, and since we didn't hear the beginning of it in the sanctuary, I'll play the video now, or I'll try, okay?
Hi, I'm Ann Donald, your clerk. I am notifying you, the members of First Church Unitarian, lawfully entitled to vote in its affairs, to meet in the sanctuary of the church or on Zoom on Sunday, October 23rd at 11:30 a.m. following the Sunday service to act on the following articles. First, to review and accept the minutes from the May 15, 2022 warranted meeting. Second, to release the $23,000 for the Green Sanctuary Engineering Study to the General Reserve Fund, as it will no longer be needed. Third, to release $15,000 from the Hybrid Worship Fund to the General Reserve Fund, as those funds are no longer needed. Fourth, to consider the disposition of fiscal year 2022 surplus of $26,111.06. Fifth, to renew the Neighborhood Supper Task Force for another year. Sixth, to transact any other business that may lawfully come before said meeting.
This morning's call to worship are the words of Martin Luther King Jr. in response to the assassination of John F. Kennedy. By our silence, by our willingness to compromise principle, by our readiness to allow arms to be purchased at will and fired at whim, by allowing our movie and television screens to teach our children that the hero is the one who masters the art of shooting and the technique of killing. We have created an atmosphere in which violence and hatred have become popular pastimes. This virus of hate that has seeped into the veins of our nation, if unchecked, will lead inevitably to our moral and spiritual doom. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Let us worship. I'd like to invite up Natalie to light our chalice. I understand Natalie lost her first tooth today. It's exciting. And as Natalie lights our chalice, please join me in saying the words of our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Thank you. Good morning. I join with Cindy in welcoming you to First Church Unitarian here in Littleton, Massachusetts. My name is Lara Hoke, and I'm so happy and lucky to be the minister serving this incredible congregation. I use she, her pronouns, and Cindy has started us on this trend of describing ourselves, which helps people who are visually impaired to have a picture of what's happening. So I will say I am a middle-aged white woman of girth, wearing round glasses and a bright yellow stole. That's enough. I want to welcome everyone who's here in the sanctuary, as well as those joining us online, and to remind you that we welcome the sound of children and babies. So don't you worry if you have a child or a baby with you who's making some noise. We like that. It's okay. So if you are new with us, we're really glad you found us, and I hope that you can stick around after the service if you wish to say hello to somebody. If you want to stay around and see what our meetings are like, you're welcome to do that too. If you're with us online and you want to learn a little more about us, if you haven't already, go to our website, fculittle.org. You can find lots of information there and find ways to contact us as well. So welcome all. Both of our hymns this morning are actually African American spirituals, and the first one, I will invite you to rise in body or spirit now. It's number 95 in the gray hymnal, There is More Love Somewhere. Words on the screens as well.
Thank you. Come on up, guys. Folks. And the pictures are up there, but I'll try and show them to you. So I've read this before, I think, but I think it's very appropriate for today. The smallest girl in the smallest grade. Hardly anyone noticed young Sally McCabe. She was the smallest girl in the smallest grade. Sure, her name could be heard in the daily roll call, and she marched with her books down the same school hall, but hardly anyone noticed young Sally McCabe. And they certainly didn't know, or at least they didn't mention, that Sally was paying super extra special attention. To the abandoned kite with the tangled string, to the 27 keys on the janitor's ring, to the leaves as they turned green to gold in the fall, and to the time Tim Torino was tripped in the hall. She watched as the wildflowers tipped toward the light and heard the howl of a hound dog late one night. She was there when the stray cats who normally fought conducted a meeting in the church parking lot. She saw Kevin McEwen get pushed off the slide and the oncoming tears that he wanted to hide. And she'll never forget the parent-teacher day when Billy's much larger father suddenly dragged him away. But through all the mean words and all the cold stares, no one even noticed that Sally was there. And they certainly didn't know, or at least they didn't mention, that Sally was paying super extra special attention. She'd seen how a whisper could make someone cower like a bulldozer crushing through fields of wild flowers, and it kept piling up, this discarded debris, those beautiful kites tangled in the trees. So on February 3rd, at 11:29, Sally stepped straight out of the lunchroom line. She said, "I'm tired of seeing this terrible stuff. Stop hurting each other. This is enough." Now, if you laughed out loud or didn't care, that there was some girl with her hand in the air. But then something super extra special happened that day as Howard O. Henry suddenly set down his tray. Like waves rolling in one after another, first Malley rose up, then Michael's twin brother. It was Tyrone and Terrence, then Amanda and Paul, who pushed out their chairs and stretched their arms tall. From the friendly lunch lady with the dishes she carded, to the new third-grade teacher who only had recently started. Yes, everyone there, even Principal Claire, had joined little Sally with their fingers in the air. And though hound dogs were destined to howl at night, and most stray cat meetings would end up as fights, and kites continued to get stuck in trees, they all felt for a moment like the janitor's keys, fastened together with a heavy steel ring that held all the secrets to unlock everything. As the world returned to the way that it was, Sally noticed the difference, as she usually does, when Billy paused briefly to open the door for Mrs. O'Connell and 17 more, or when Molly scooched over to make space on the coral riser for Ellen and Grace. These moments that often got taken for granted, a wildflower appearing where no one had planted. The swings soon resumed their rhythm and sway, and day turned to night, and night turned to day. And people remembered and would quite often mention that Sally had been paying super extra special attention, and how the world could transform and change could be made by the smallest girl in the smallest grade.
Yonder come day, day is a breaking. Yonder come day, oh my soul. Oh, yonder come day, day is a breaking. Sun is a rising in my soul. Oh, yonder come day, day is a breaking. Yonder come day, oh my soul. Oh, yonder come day, day is a breaking. Sun is a rising in my soul. Yonder come day, day is a breaking. Yonder come day, oh my soul. Oh, yonder come day, day is a breaking. Sun is a rising in my soul.
Day is breaking all around. I'm singing, sun is rising in my soul. I'm singing, day is breaking all around. I'm singing, sun is rising in my soul.
I'm singing yonder comes day,
I'm singing, sun is rising in my soul.
yonder comes day,
Singing, sun is rising in my soul.
oh yonder come day, day is breaking. Yonder come day, oh my soul. Yonder come day, day is breaking. Sun is a rising in my. Yonder come day, day is a breaking. Sun is a rising in my soul.
I should have said before, feel better soon, Anne, to our clerk. And I'm glad you're not physically here because we don't have heat today, so I hope you're staying warm, and that means that somewhere my mother is online watching me in my shirt sleeves and I'm making her cold. So sorry, Mom. Normally, for visitors, we do have lights and fans in the restroom and heat in the building, just so you know. You're here on a very special day. Oh, the lights are working now. All right, excellent. Good news. All right. So today, as we do about once a month, we have a Share the Plate Sunday. And today's Share the Plate recipient is the Unitarian Universalist Association's Disaster Relief Fund. The UUA uses donations to this fund to respond as flexibly as possible to current disaster needs and new emergencies as they arise. Right now, several UU congregations in Florida and their members have suffered adverse effects from the recent Hurricane Ian, and I'm sure you've seen some of the pictures and videos showing the devastation to that area. So here's a way that we can reach out and help our fellow UUs. In a moment, you'll see a video featuring Ben Atherton-Zeman. Many of you will know, used to be a member here, and he is now a minister serving in St. Petersburg, Florida. And he's going to speak to you about his family and congregation's experience, as well as the experience of other congregations who are more directly impacted and more directly in the path of Ian. So after you see the video in a moment, I'm going to tell you ways that you can make a donation.
Hey friends, it's Ben down in Florida. I bring you greetings and love from Lucinda and Lufa and myself. And thank you so much for taking up this collection for the UU Disaster Relief Fund. This Hurricane Ian was our first hurricane in our little family down here, and it was pretty terrifying. We did evacuate. My dad has a place across the state in Vero Beach, and apparently this happens a lot. The hurricane followed us, but we did manage to come home safely, and we're fine. I was more worried about our congregants and the church. We all scurried around to contact each of the congregants. We have about 130, 140 of them, and everyone else was fine too. The church suffered pretty minimal damage considering. We do have some expenses, and so we will be applying to the Disaster Relief Fund for about $4,500 worth of expenses. So any amount that you give to them helps. Now, we got off easy compared to our neighbors to the south. I was in touch with my fellow ministers in Sarasota and Venice, and for both UU congregations in Fort Myers. And, you know, different folks had different amounts of damage, amounts of time without power, and in many cases were not able to do Sunday worship service. So we're doing what we can down here in Florida. I really appreciate you doing what you can to contribute to the UU Disaster Relief Fund. I would love to hear from any of you. Please write me or contact me either on Facebook. I'm Facebook friends with many of you, or at the UU Church of St. Pete, where my email is minister@uustpete.org. Take care. Blessings.
So if you are here in the sanctuary and would like to make a donation to the UU Disaster Relief Fund, you can put cash into the offering plate as it comes around and it will go to the fund. Or if you have your checkbook, you can make a check out to the UUA Disaster Relief Fund. If you are with us online and you want to make a donation, you can go to the website giving.uua.org, giving.uua.org, and you can donate there. Or you could send a check in through the mail to UUA Disaster Relief Fund at the UUA, Attention Gift Processing, 24 Farnsworth Street, Boston, Massachusetts, 02210. This morning's offering will now be given and received in grateful appreciation. Please join with me in the words of our community response. We are grateful for the opportunity to give and serve, and grateful for the gifts we have received. May this affirm the ministries of our church community, both within and beyond these walls. Most weeks, this congregation shares a special, important time to feel again our connections to that which we consider holy and to feel our connections to one another. And it's in this spirit that we share the candles of caring. If you have an important joy or concern that you would like to share with this gathered, beloved community, if you're in the sanctuary, I invite you to raise your hand high enough so that we can see it, and we will come around to you with a microphone, which we ask that you hold reasonably close to your mouth so that it works for us. And tell us your name and briefly let us know how we might direct our thoughts, prayers, and healing wishes. If you are online on Zoom, you can use your electronic hand. You can raise your hand electronically, and you can share there as well. Are there any joys or concerns in the sanctuary this morning? Any candles of caring and trust, sharing those cares dearest to us with this gathered, beloved community? Let us hold in our hearts and our thoughts and prayers those joys and concerns spoken aloud this morning, as well as those that remain unspoken, as we share together in a time of sacred silence. Amen, and blessed be. Everybody sitting here today knows it. We, as a country, have a serious gun problem. There have been more gun deaths between civilians in the streets of the United States in my lifetime, that is, between 1968 and today, than the number of soldiers and sailors killed in every U.S. conflict since the Revolutionary War. We think sometimes that we know a little bit about the people who shoot people. So many times we hear about a tragic mass shooting. Statistically, we know that the shooter is usually a young white male in those cases. And so many times the media reports how mentally troubled or outright mentally ill the shooter is or was. But is mental illness the problem? A 2021 study by the Rand Corporation found that U.S. residents with mental health problems are not more likely to engage in gun violence than those without mental health problems. In fact, the study showed that those with mental health problems are more likely to be the victims of gun violence than the perpetrators of gun violence. Also, there are many countries that have similar rates of mental illness as the United States, but they have far lower rates of gun violence and gun deaths. One striking example is here in the United States, approximately 17% of our residents suffer from some form of mental illness. Australia's rate of mental illness is similar, a little higher, 19%. And yet, in the United States, there are 12 gun deaths per 100,000 people. And in Australia, there is just 1 gun death per 100,000 people. Why does Australia, and actually all of the other high-income countries, why do they have so few gun deaths compared to the United States? What stands out is America's passion for owning guns. There are 120 guns for every 100 Americans, more guns than Americans. There are just 15 guns for every 100 Australians, to keep this example. According to a Swiss-based research project, after the United States' 120 guns per 100 residents, the closest next is Yemen with 53 guns per 100 residents, and after that, Serbia with 39 guns per 100 residents. The United States has the weakest gun laws and the most guns, 393 million of them, of any comparable high-income country. United States residents are 25 times more likely to be killed in a gun homicide than residents of other high-income countries. As I noted, the United States has 12 gun deaths per 100,000 people. Among other high-income countries, the second highest rate of gun deaths per 100,000 people is Finland with 3, 1/4 our rate. We often think of Mexico as a country that is filled with drug trafficking gangs, but they have approximately half the number of gun deaths per resident that we do. To sum up, the correlation to gun violence is not a correlation to mental illness. The correlation of gun violence is a correlation to guns. The number of guns on the streets, the correlation is to gun ownership. Lots of guns correlates to lots of gun violence, which is part of the reason that our local situation is disturbing. I don't know if you've heard about our local situation here in Littleton. I'm going to fill you in case you don't know this. It turns out that the old mill building downtown in Littleton on Great Road, just by the Littleton Common, is, according to recent articles in the Boston Globe, home to the largest cluster of federally licensed gun manufacturers and dealers in the nation. Littleton Common, home to the largest cluster of federally licensed gun manufacturers and dealers in the nation. This is apparently something that's been developing here since 2016, and it's been noticed now that there are 80-plus gun tenants in that building. Massachusetts is not generally a big gun state, like some of the southern states, like Pennsylvania, the state I grew up in with deer hunting. And Massachusetts is one of a handful of states that has banned assault weapons. But it turns out that multiple vendors here in Littleton are exploiting loopholes in the gun laws we have here, selling military-style guns and other forbidden guns. In theory, for instance, AR-15s or other semi-automatic weapons, selling them to people who are not in law enforcement is a felony in Massachusetts. But some of the dealers in the mill building here are, according to the Globe, modifying the weapons or disassembling them and selling them as parts, and therefore their transactions are technically legal, according to the letter of the law, unless the loopholes can somehow be shut down. You might be comforted to know that the Globe reports that the town officials here say they've never been so inundated by concern about an issue as this one, and they are taking it very seriously and looking for ways to change that situation. You might also be pleased to hear that the local state senator and other Massachusetts elected officials are considering crafting and shepherding bills to end loopholes and to limit the number of gun dealers that can be within a certain distance of each other. But any way you look at it, it's not good news to be home to the largest cluster of gun dealers in the nation, especially in a nation as gun-happy as the United States. Assault-style weapons and other banned semi-automatic guns are especially intimidating. We associate them with mass shootings, which are, of course, horrifying and more common here than other high-income countries. According to Everytown for Gun Safety, of all mass shooting incidents between 2009 and 2018 in this country, assault weapons accounted for about a quarter of the deaths, just to give you some sense. Mass shootings are horrific, and the United States, as I said, has more than our share of them. However, deaths from mass shootings in the United States, including those using assault weapons, account for a relatively small fraction of all gun deaths. The research shows that handguns are the biggest problem, by far. Unfortunately, the gun dealers in Littleton sell handguns as well, perfectly legal. According to the FBI, in 2020, handguns were involved in 59% of all U.S. gun murderers and non-negligent manslaughters. Rifles, including assault guns, were used in about 3% of these gun murders. Shotguns used in about 1%, and the remainder involved unclassified or unknown guns. So by far, the handguns are the biggest culprit. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or the CDC, guns are the leading cause of death among children and teens in the United States, no longer car accidents, guns. Women in the United States are 21 times more likely to be killed with a gun than women in other high-income countries. 1 in 5 homicides in the United States is domestic, related to family disputes, including people killed in the crossfire. And 3 out of the 4 guns used in these cases, again, were handguns. It turns out that in this country, gun access triples the risk of suicide, and the majority of suicides, more than half, involve guns. According to the CDC also, gun homicide has a disproportionate impact on communities of color. In the United States, black men make up 52% of all gun homicide victims, despite comprising less than 7% of the overall population. Compared to white children and teens, black children and teens in the US are 14 times more likely to die by gun homicide. I could go on and on with horrifying statistics, but I'm going to share just one more that's of a different kind. According to the Annals of Internal Medicine, 7.5 million adults in the United States, about 3% of the population, became first-time new gun owners between January 2019 and April 2021, during the heart of the COVID-19 pandemic. This means 11 million more people, including 5 million more children, are now exposed to firearms in their homes. And a study by the American Academy of Pediatrics linked a rise in gun ownership during the pandemic to higher rates of gun injuries among and inflicted by children. So how did these shocking statistics come to be? Guns have always been a part of the life of this country, even before we were officially our own country. The European settlers brought guns along with them, and they've been a central part of our landscape ever since. European settlers felt that they needed the guns to survive. In part, they needed them to hunt. But immediately, too, guns were turned on human beings. As the documentary Violence, an American Tradition points out, Indians were the first victims of violence in America. It was a type of violence imported here from Europe, a tradition of violence by whites against non-whites. After American independence was won, after the Constitution was adopted, the very second item that the Founding Fathers thought to amend was, of course, the right to bear arms. This was codified before slaves were freed, before non-whites, women, or non-property owning white men were given the right to vote. Some will note correctly that the Second Amendment was intended to apply to militias rather than individuals. But keep in mind that the militias they were thinking of weren't so much the kind that fought in the Revolutionary War. Rather, they were protecting largely militias formed to hunt down fugitive slaves. Of course, within 100 years of the founding of this nation, our tradition of violence led to our own Civil War. And the mass production of guns really took off during the Civil War, according to a PBS special report. Then, when the Civil War was over, troops were generally allowed to keep their guns. And so, as the PBS report notes, suddenly a country with a few thousand guns became one with millions. 1 year after the Civil War ended, the Winchester repeating rifle was invented. In the same year, 1866, the Ku Klux Klan was formed. Another part of our tradition of violence is making heroes out of people with guns. Jesse James is an American hero, Butch Cassidy. Having a gun becomes associated not just with being tough or daring or manly, but also with being an individualist, as the PBS report pointed out. How American. And then there are the movies. Of course, Westerns and war movies were incredibly popular for a long, long time. And even today, most blockbuster movies have elements of violence. Even today, movies are more apt to get an R rating because of sexual content rather than violent content. Television is also full of violence. According to the documentary Violence in American Tradition, by age 18, Americans have witnessed 18,000 television murders. Toy guns were, of course, very popular toys when many of us grew up. Today, violent video games have somewhat replaced toy guns. We are implicated in this culture of casual violence as entertainment, even as glamorous. And so Martin Luther King Jr.'s words, the words that you heard as our call to worship, still hold true today, almost 60 years after he said them. He said, "By our readiness to allow arms to be purchased at will and fired at whim, by allowing our movie and television screens to teach our children that the hero is one who masters the art of shooting and the technique of killing, by allowing all these developments, we have created an atmosphere in which violence and hatred have become popular pastimes." As I said, King's words were in response to the gunfire that killed John F. Kennedy, and of course, less than 5 years later, King too was killed by gunfire. Fear seems to fuel much of our gun problem. As the PBS special report noted, gun manufacturers sell fear. They've made lots of money by convincing people that they need a gun to be safe. But according to the Children's Defense Fund report, a gun in the home doesn't make a family safer. A gun in the home increases the risk of homicide by 200%. A gun in the home increases the risk of suicide by up to 400%. And a gun in the home increases the risk of accidental death by 300%. A gun in the home makes it too easy to kill yourself or someone you know, accidentally, or during a horrible, tragic moment of pain or anger. It isn't about mental illness. It's about the darkest moments of the human condition. To own a gun, to hold a gun as an ordinary human being who is sometimes terrified, sometimes in despair, sometimes furious beyond reason, is to turn an ordinary human being into a potentially homicidal person. Personally, the only time I had access to a gun was during my first 3 years that I was in the Navy, when I was a special agent with the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS. I was issued a revolver, and I had it on me all day long during all work days. You know, part of the reason I picked the Navy instead of one of the other services was that I pictured myself floating around a ship at sea with a bosun's whistle, tying really awesome nautical knots, maybe singing a sea shanty, who knows. But the Navy found a way to give me a gun anyway. I never had to shoot anyone, thank goodness, and I never had anyone shoot at me. And only once in those 3 years did I actually have to pull out my gun other than at a firing range. It's not that I was never in danger, but I was lucky overall. But I can tell you this. I have never felt so paranoid in my life as I did during those 3 years with a concealed handgun on my person all the time. The thing is, when you have a gun on you, in the back of your mind, there's this idea that you might have to use it. The whole idea of carrying a gun is that you might need to use it in a hurry. And so if I'm carrying a loaded gun, it must be because my surroundings are filled with danger, right? It's like the saying goes, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, when you have a gun, it can be easy to be scared, sometimes with good reason. It's easy to imagine that everyone's a potential threat. I believe not only do we own guns because of fear, but at least based on my own personal experience, to have access to a gun is to make one more fearful, not less. I don't think gun control legislation alone is enough to overcome our culture of violence in this country, but there is clear evidence that it does make a difference. According to Faiths Against Gun Violence, in the 16 states and the District of Columbia, where a background check is required for all handgun sales, there are, compared to places that don't require those background checks, fewer women killed with a gun by an intimate partner by 38%, fewer suicides with a gun by 49%, and fewer police officers murdered with a handgun that was not their own, 39% less. So I am very much in favor of common sense gun control legislation that would require everyone who buys a gun to pass a criminal background check. I'm in favor of making it illegal for civilians to purchase assault weapons, which have no legitimate purpose for self-defense or hunting. And that is illegal in the United States, in the Massachusetts rather, and so I'd like to see us close those loopholes. I'd like to see more gun buyback programs. I'd like to see our police forces be demilitarized. But I'm aware that simple handguns cause most of the problems. The good news is, according to a 2020 Gallup poll, more than half of Americans support having stricter gun control laws. And so this is why it's so good and so important to be politically engaged, to get involved with things like You, the Vote, as you have a chance to do after our congregational meeting today. Because when we get out the vote, if more Americans vote, more of our desires, including the desire for stricter gun control laws, can be met. And yes, Littleton officials have heard lots of voices regarding the mill, but let's make sure they hear ours too. I have a simple letter that you can modify as you wish and sign and mail in. I'll be emailing you that and other options later today. A broader issue, and one for the community of faith to take on, is addressing the wide-ranging culture of violence in this country. Is there any way to make nonviolence glamorous? Is there a way to celebrate nonviolence? Veterans Day is coming, and I think this Veterans Day, we should thank longtime peace activists and conscientious objectors along with veterans. Somewhere beyond gun control legislation, the larger culture of violence needs to be pulled out from its roots. It's time to demilitarize and rehumanize. And so I'll close, as I began, with the words of Martin Luther King Jr. Hate begets hate. Violence begets violence. Toughness begets a greater toughness. We must meet the forces of hate with the power of love. One day we must come to see that peace is not merely a distant goal that we seek, but that it is a means by which we arrive at that goal. We must pursue peaceful ends through peaceful means. May we indeed lay down our sword and shield and study war no more. Blessed be, and amen. Our closing hymn is number 162 in the gray hymnal, and you'll also see words on the screens. For our closing words, I invite you, if you're comfortable, and you check with the person next to you to hold hands. If you prefer, you can touch elbows, or if you wish, just hold up your hands and feel the energy between us and those who are online as well. Friends, we have had enough. We've had enough violence. We've had enough senseless deaths from senseless guns. We need to do such a better job of loving each other, of helping each other, of making sure we truly keep each other safe, not with more guns, but with fewer guns, that we keep each other safe by giving people the services they need, by filling people with hope and the resources that they need. We can make this country so much less violent. We can do it. We have to make our will the way, pursuing peaceful ends through peaceful means. I know we can. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. Please be seated.